There aren't many games that manage to crush your spirit, test your patience, and still have you coming back for more. But Battle Brothers does exactly that. It's not flashy, it's not forgiving, and it doesn't care if you lose half of your mercenary company to a bunch of bandits 2 days into the campaign. But that's exactly what makes it special. Today, I'm diving into why Battle Brothers stands out as one of the best tactical strategy games ever made. From its punishing combat to the way it forces you to care about every single soldier under your command. This is a game that rewards planning and punishes carelessness. Battle Brothers is developed and published by Overhyped Studios. This game offers a pretty unique blend of turn-based combat and deep mercenary management, set in an unforgiving medieval low fantasy world, with its dynamically generated world map, a diverse range of enemies, and a complex injury system. Battle Brothers has an experience that's as engaging as it is ruthless. So grab your sword and shield and let's explore what makes Battle Brothers one of the best strategy games. Let's start with the world. First off, as I mentioned, a new world is generated for you every single game. The world of this game is rather painfully generic. It's a medieval time period where orcs and monsters exist, there's feudal lords and peasants that toil underneath them. On the southern portion of the map, there are these Middle Eastern-esque stand-ins who have a strange culture and believe in a different religion than the rest of the map. There is no magic that you can use or anything else along those lines, although there are witches and necromancers to fight. But even as I talk about how the world is rather bland and uninspired, I still do find it endearing. While there's not too much world building, it's pretty fun to just be in pure generic medieval slop and be in charge of a mercenary company in it. And they actually take the world seriously. There's no poking fun at the fact that you're in every medieval world ever invented. It's just taken seriously. This is the world that you inhabit. So in this game, as I mentioned, you are in charge of a mercenary company. But to determine what type of mercenary company you start out with, there are a couple different origins to start with. Now, if you have all the DLCs, which I recommend you do, they are pretty cheap and they help the studio out. They are entirely self-funded. The default ones is what I recommend you to start with. It has you start as part of a mercenary company as the second in command, and some unexpected shenanigans go down, which leads you to becoming the leader of the survivor. So this origin is basically the default one. It gives you some help and pointers as you start out, and it even gives you a starter contract, so it can kind of ease you into how the game starts, and then you also start with some okay-ish mercenaries. It is really the perfect origin to start the game with. Now there are a lot of other origins. They all have their own pros and cons and unique aspects to them. I'm not going to go over every origin, but I will talk about some of the more cool or unique ones, such as my favorite, the Lone Wolf origin. You start as a hedge knight going from tournament to tournament, and then you realize you could start a mercenary company and make a lot more money and have some friends. In this origin, you actually have a player character on the field. You play as the aforementioned hedge knight, and if that character dies, your campaign is over. But he starts at a high level and has great equipment. It's a super fun origin where at the start you barely have any money and your player character has to do a lot of the heavy lifting until you can actually find some other mercenaries who can carry their own weight. And it's the only origin in-game where you actually have a player character that represents you on the map. In every other origin, you are just more so an eye in the sky. You are just in charge of the mercenary company. You don't do any of the fighting. Another really cool origin is the Oath Takers. You play as a retired old Oath Taker Knight, which are basically sort of think like Knights Templar, some sort of religious order, militant group. They are religious warriors, and a group of Oath Taker Knights find you, and they are in dire straits and ask you to help lead them into battle for coin. Now in this origin, you take oaths. They give you buffs and debuffs. So you might take an oath where your warriors won't use any healing items for a week, but in exchange for that debuff, you'll get a bunch of other buffs such as increased damage, increased dodge, things of that nature. There's also a cultist origin where you lead a cult devoted to a dark god, where you play the game as normal, but at times your god will ask for a sacrifice in exchange for powerful boons. So there are some interesting ones, and then there's also some more generic or bland ones, but I think there's around 12 in total, and I mean some of them are just references to other franchises, like there's a Beast Slayer origin, and you are basically just witchers. I mean, they're all pretty fun. I mean, they all have their own pros and cons. But let's talk about the world map where you will be spending a lot of time. So every game, as I mentioned, there will be a new procedurally generated map. There will be all settlements split between 3 different noble houses in the north, and then down south there are 3 Arabian-inspired city-states with unique contracts and traders. There's also an arena you can fight at down south. Now, for the map, there are settlements. This is where you get regular contracts, which are your bread and butter for this game. There are a variety of contracts, each with different difficulty ratings, ranging from 1 to 3 skulls. Obviously, the more skulls, the harder the contract. Now, there isn't a crazy variety of different contracts. There are some unique ones, but you're generally going to be doing caravan guarding, clearing out locations, tracking down peoples or groups, or exploring different parts of the map. And of course, there are some other more unique ones like defending towns from witches or defending towns from bandits. But what they all have in common is that you're most likely going to be fighting something or someone. This is, after all, the whole point of the game. Now, along with regular settlements, there are also another different type of settlement called fortresses. This is where the nobility of the world resides, and you can only take contracts from fortresses once you have at least 1,000 renown, which is basically just a representation of how well known and famous your mercenary company is. So only higher up mercenary companies are allowed to work for nobles, but the payout is a lot better. So what you can do at settlements besides take contracts is buy food, buy repair materials, and medicine that you need to keep your company running. If you run out of food, your soldiers will start to desert. If you run out of repair materials, then your soldiers' equipment is going to be and stay broken. If you run out of medicine, you can't heal your soldiers and their wounds will only get worse. You also have to make sure that you have enough money to pay for your mercenaries' daily upkeep, as well as making sure you have enough money to hire new people and buy new equipment. Managing resources and money is a big part of this game. Now, on to how actually running your mercenary company works. Once you've chosen your origin and you understand how the map works, you're going to get to take a look at your first group of mercenaries that you start with. Now, at the start, depending on your origin, all your mercenaries should have maybe decent equipment and roughly the same stats, and most likely the same starting background. So if you do the peasant militia origin, all of your starting mercenaries are going to have the peasant militia background. Backgrounds determine the character's backstories and what traits they start with. So there are a couple of different ones, there's like blacksmith, apprentice, historian, beggar, daytailor. All of these things just sort of determine what your starting attributes are and what they're more naturally gifted towards. Now, the attributes your characters have are head armor, body armor, hit points, action points, fatigue, morale, melee skill, range skill, melee defense, range defense, damage, effective attack against armor, chance to hit head, and finally vision. Now, most of these are pretty self-explanatory, I'm sure, if you speak English, and then some of them can only be raised or lowered depending on the armor that your character is wearing. The rest you will have the chance to level up whenever your character levels up. You'll be able to put a skill point into 3 of those different categories, and it will increase their attributes by an amount set by how naturally skilled or unskilled they are in that category. Some characters are naturally going to be better at melee attacks, while some are going to be naturally better more at ranged attacks. Now, also when you level up, you also get a perk point. Now, there are a wide variety of perks to take. Some of them are more basic, like increasing your skill with swords, or you take less damages from hit on the heads. Other ones are more like Colossus, which increases your health, or Gifted, which increases your level by 1 automatically, but you don't get the perk point back. Or others makes you more specialized in heavy or light armor. There are a pretty wide variety of perks to choose from. Now, when you actually want to hire a new mercenary for your company, you hire them at settlements and fortresses, or you might occasionally get one from an event. All recruits are random. The only thing that you really know about them is their background. And you can usually hire better skilled mercenaries and recruits from fortresses, so maybe they start out already at level 3 or 2, but you have to pay more to them up front in order to get them. Each recruit you pick up, depending on background, will give your company different events and options in certain on-map events. Like, let's say you hire a gambler. Then maybe you'll get the event where he wants to dogfight with your battle hound for some extra money on the side. Or maybe he just wants to gamble with you and your tin. Another example, let's say you have a mercenary who's really agile and fast, and you get an event where a kid needs help getting a cat down from a tree. Maybe you can send that mercenary to help instead of just doing nothing. Now that you understand how mercenary management works, let's move on to how to make money and fight in the world of Battle Brothers. Now, as I mentioned before, in settlements and fortresses, you can take on contracts, which of course involve fighting. So once a combat encounter starts, it's turn-based. Who goes first is based on each warrior's initiative stat. Each mercenary and enemy has action points that they use to attack and move. If they run out of action points, they can't do anything for the rest of the turn. Now, the equipment on your brothers will determine what moves and attack they can use. They have almost every type of weapon in this game that you can imagine being in a generic medieval world. There are swords and falcons, which allow you to slash at opponents. There are spears, which you can use to stab at an opponent, and you can also have a spear wall ability, which lets you attempt to attack and stop enemies from moving into your area of control. Spears and shields are great weapons for when your company is first starting out. There are also pole arms like bills and long axes and banners that can attack from 2 tiles away and also from behind their allies, making them very useful. There are also axes and armor picks, which are great for destroying armor and shields. And there's also, of course, ranged weapons like bows and crossbows and slings, and even guns, although quite rudimentary ones. Having ranged troops is almost always a must. Even if they are a bit harder to train and find, they should theoretically be staying alive longer because they're in the back row of your troops. There are a plethora of other weapons, all with their own purpose and pros and cons. And of course, there's upgraded types of each weapon. So you can start off with a basic wooden spear, and then there's also militia spears and special spears that do more damage. And they all allow the character that they're equipped with to do different types of attacks. Now, as I mentioned, when you're fighting, it is a tile-based movement system. The enemy will have different armor and weapons depending on who you're fighting, from low-level bandits who are just wearing rags and equipped with wooden sticks to well-equipped noblemen in their routines. The enemy plays by the same set of rules as you, so it's fairly easy to pick up and understand what they're going to be able to do in their turn. Fights in this game can go very wrong from just one bad roll, which is obviously how you attack. When you attack, depending on your stats, weapon, and some other factors, you have, let's say, a 50% chance to hit. So, again, 50% chance to hit means 50% chance to lose. It's a lot like XCOM in that manner. One bad roll can piss you off if you continue to not hit the enemy. And it can also start a bit of a chain reaction. Let's say your men are engaged in a melee and the enemy gets a lucky hit, killing one of your men. That will demoralize the rest of your men, debuffing them and then making them easier pickings for the enemy, causing you to retreat and failing the contract. There will be battles where you lose because of luck, but there will be an equal amount of times where you're saved by luck. Now, this game, as I mentioned all of that, will bring out the save scummer in you, especially when you're starting out, because you'll grow attached to your band, or because you feel like the game bullshitted you with some rolls, or because you just lost too many men in what should have been an easy battle. But really try not to. Now, your first playthrough, I honestly do recommend you save scum. Just get the hang of things, try to understand how the battles work, what moves to make when you're facing certain opponents, till you win. Now, the game will offer this advice and I will offer it to you. If your plan relies on luck, it is not a good plan. Each combat counter should be thought out. You shouldn't just be charging blindly or using the same strategy for different opponents. Making haphazard moves will get your men killed and cost you money. Save scumming can help you get better at the game to a certain extent. But once you have a grasp of the game, you're only diminishing your own enjoyment. But, of course, I'm not your dad or the government. Play how you want. The game also only gets harder the longer you play the same campaign. Eventually, you're going to get better contracts, which pay out more, but that's because the enemies you're fighting are harder to kill. This can really put you in a tough spot, because as you get deeper and deeper into the campaign, you're completing job after job, you have access to the best contracts, but maybe you lose a battle and lose a couple men. Or maybe you win the battle, but a lot of your soldiers are dead. You then have to rebuild the company while then doing more hard contracts. I mean, there's been a couple campaigns where I'm left with like 3 hardcore veterans, and then I have the rest of the company just filled with like rookies who are hopeless in combat. And I just have to hope that enough of them survive to higher levels to be able to maintain my current high level of success. Now, this isn't all about just regular contracts. Eventually the game does shake up a little bit with what they call Endgame crises. So you can play all of them in the same campaign or choose to stop playing after the first one ends. Every 100 days in-game, an in-game crisis will start, which are an opportunity for big paychecks and different types of contracts. So there are 3 of them. There is a noble war, which takes place between new noble houses, and you can fight for either side. There's a greenskin invasion with orcs and goblins invading all of humanity, and there's an undead attack where the dead start to rise up to restore their lost king. And then they also recently added a new one, somewhat recently, a holy war between the southern city-states and the northern nobles. They're all really cool and have different events and missions for each. I think the game is pretty infinitely replayable. Every world is different, so obviously it's a new map every time. The origins add great variety and make the Mercenary company different every time. There are also so many events in game that I don't think you can see them all. I still constantly find new ones. Battles always play out differently every time. It's basically impossible to get the same series of dice throws in a row. This is the type of game where I come back every year and we'll just do like a 1 to 3 week binge of it. I always come back to it, and I think if you try it out, you would too. I honestly want to give it a 9 out of 10 because it's such a great game made by an independent indie studio. I mean, and it fills the niche perfectly. I mean, it's basically one of the only Mercenary company games ever. I mean, other than I guess like Commandos, but nothing really set in a medieval time period. I think this game rather brilliantly combines the complexity of tactical RPGs with the harsh realities of managing a mercenary company in a medieval, monster-filled world. It's a game that's going to challenge your strategic planning and decision-making process and forces you to become adaptable. From the variety of origins to the dynamic world map, each playthrough is a new adventure. The combat is intense and unforgiving, and every decision you make can lead to glory or disaster. Managing your company's resources, selecting the right contracts, and nurturing your mercenaries are as critical to the game as your battlefield tactics. While the game can be brutally challenging and sometimes seems like you rely on luck, I think it's this very element that adds to the charm and its replayability. It feels like a lot more than just a game. It's a journey full of ups and downs, triumphs and defeats, and for anybody who loves strategy and tactical RPGs, I think Battle Brothers is a gem worth exploring. I honestly think it's a bit of a testament to what indie studios can achieve, and it really stands out in the genre. And because of this game, they actually got a pretty big publisher for the next game that they're developing now. So, any indie devs out there, maybe take some notes. So if you ever played Battle Brothers, I'd love to hear your experience and strategies in the comments below. Please like and subscribe. That's all I got, and please remember that Jesus loves you.